Caitlin Childs, who's 10 years old. How can you ensure that I will enjoy the natural resource heritage in South Carolina? Dwight?
I think that the single most important way that I as governor could ensure that Caitlin has the benefit of the natural resources is to provide leadership to do things like make the change in DHEC that we were just talking about, provide the leadership to ensure that she and her age group of kids that are in school are educated on the importance of the environment and what they need to know about the natural resources of this state, and provide the leadership so that our schools teach Caitlin and those in our public schools what they can do to assume the responsibility that we now have, and so that frankly they can do a better job than we have done for them. But it's up to us meaning adults, to do all we can, and I would commit to you that I would do that as governor, to be sure that we do all that we can to leave our natural resources in better shape than we have them today. And we have it within our power to do that, and that's what I would answer to Caitlin.
Mullins?
Yeah, I agree with Dwight in that ultimately we're stewards, and that's the way we have to view our surroundings and view our natural resources. Long term, it's about planning, it's about vision. In the short term, the question was asked earlier today about would you fund the Conservation Land Bank in lean economic times? Well, I think if you don't fund it in lean economic times, that increases the likelihood that our natural resources will not be there for next generations. That's the whole purpose of the Conservation Land Bank, is to ensure that our natural resources will remain intact for my daughter and hopefully someday my grandchildren.
Jim Rex?
Well, the simple, quick answer is protect and educate. Protect the natural resources we have. The Conservation Land Bank is a part of that. We're going to have a governor who makes that one of the state's priorities, not the state's priority, but one of them. I'll give you a quick example. I don't know how many of you knew this, but a few years ago, money was actually transferred from the Conservation Land Bank to my agency to pay for fuel for school buses. So as long as you have an antiquated system of this versus that, conservation is not going to be treated as a priority. So that's part of the protection. When it comes to the education, we've talked about it, but one thing I want to emphasize that I hadn't touched on, and then I'll say no more about this. When we talk about educating young people to participate in the out of doors, we have to be sure we're addressing the diversity of our population. A lot of the educating I've seen, a lot of the mentoring I've seen is frankly directed at white kids. Mostly boys, sometimes a few girls thrown in for good measure. This state and this nation is getting browner, not whiter. The world is getting flatter, not rounder. And we have to have programs that introduce males and females, different socioeconomic levels, different races, Hispanics as well as African American and white students, to the out of doors. But these sportsman groups that I have asked to go talk to about these natural resource centers, when I ask them what their programs are in terms of getting this next generation involved, it's almost all focused on white males, young white males. That's not what we're looking like, and that's not what we're going to look like in the future. So the public schools, I think, is the forum for doing that.
Vince Sheehy?
Thank you. I think I know who the questioner might be, but I think we owe it to her to recognize her. Caitlin, are you out there? Would you stand up for a minute? Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you, Caitlin, for asking the question. I have a young man who is 9 years old, about your same age. And I'll tell you the answer to the question is what you just did, and that is speak out. Why was the Conservation Voters founded? It was to speak out. Why was Coastal Conservation founded? Why are they so aggressive in state legislatures? To speak out. What does the Catawba Valley Land Trust do, Lindsay? You speak out and preserve lands that are needed to be preserved. And what does Upstate Forever do? They speak out to protect the areas in our state that we need to protect. It's what I've tried to do and what I pledge to do as a governor. It is speak out about what we have in this state and what we can preserve. And when you speak out, then we can preserve land in South Carolina. Then we can improve water quality in South Carolina. Then we can pass legislation that helps make sure that we have the quantities needed within our rivers and streams. Then we can move away from coal-fired power plants. But we cannot be afraid to speak out in defense of our natural resources and what God has given us. And Caitlin, I thank you.